Hey there and welcome to Photoshop 301, Section 1 on Type. In this section, we're going to show you everything you need to know about working with type in Photoshop, including adding new fonts to Photoshop using Typekit, as well as adjusting spacing in between each letter to get the most out of each font you work with in Photoshop. Alright guys, we got an awesome section. Let's go ahead and jump into Photoshop. Alright, we're going to start off by opening up our image. Let's hit Control-Command-O. We're going to go through Photoshop 301, 01 type, and here in our images folder, we've got 01 type.tiff. So let's go ahead and hit open here. All right, I'm gonna hit F for full screen, and we're gonna start off by basically showing you guys how this image is made, because it looks pretty simple, but it is made of a bunch of different layers that were kind of cut together. Okay, so let's go ahead and start with our background. So here in our background, we've got a few different layers. We're starting off with a solid fill adjustment layer, giving us this blue color. Next, we've got another one that's got a green color, and we're using a gradient to kind of mask it in from the top to the bottom. And next, we've got our texture. Now, this texture is actually the exact same texture that's on our subject's jacket. Now, it's actually a picture of the subject's jacket. So let's go ahead and make the subject visible here. We're going to take this layer and change the blend mode from screen back to normal. Okay, and I'm going to hit Control or Command T. We're going to go ahead and lock the width and the height there, and we're going to go ahead and bring that down. So you can see it's actually the exact same jacket as our subject was wearing. Basically, we just put this on the ground, took a picture of this, and here in Photoshop, scaled it a lot larger, and then changed the blend mode to give it a unique texture in the background. So kind of a cool element to kind of combine what's going on with our subject to a texture in the background. All right, I'm going to hit Escape. That's going to resize it back to how it was. We're going to change our blend mode from normal to screen, which is going to basically just get rid of the darks there. Okay? And then we're going to put our layer here with the white, basically just, let's make our subject invisible right now. A color fill layer with white, and we've got a layer mask here, so it's only visible here in this area. All right, just gives it like a little bit of a highlight right behind our subject. Okay, next we have our subject. Let's go ahead and make him visible. And we've got a bunch of different adjustment layers here on our subject. Basically, he's just cut out from his background, so we photographed our subject on a green background, started off by cutting him out of the background, and then all these layers are just used to adjust like color, as well as we've got a little bit of sharpening, and then we've got some, this layer here basically adds the same gradient on his mug as it's in the background. So again, just trying to tie the subject to the background in really interesting ways. Okay. Next we have our table. Now our subject was photographed on this like white box here, and we made this like pretty quickly right before the photo shoot. So basically what we did is just extended out the box to the left and the right and got rid of all the, all the little like this line and things like that. Basically this area here where the subject is actually touching the box, that's the exact same as the original photo. Everything else was just extended out. So that was done just simple, a couple different like regular layers here. Basically just used the marquee tool, made a selection there, and then just used the brush tool on this layer, sampled the color, and then painted that out. So relatively simple there. And then we've got a white layer that basically goes from a white gradient up to the top there. Okay, so that makes up our table, and then just added a little bit of a coffee text on here, an example. Now this I actually pulled from Adobe stock, and we're going to be working on adding our own coffee text in this image. All right. So that's a basic idea of how this image was actually created. Let's go ahead and jump into type. So we're going to start off by creating a little bit of type here. So I'm going to hit T for the type tool. Okay, and we're going to click here, and I'm just going to type in C-O-F-F-E-E, coffee. That spells coffee. Now let's go ahead and work on our adjustments for our type. We're going to go to Window and down to Character. Okay, now a real quick overview here. Here within the Character menu, you have a lot of different options that actually adjust your type. And you have basically the same options here up at the top. So this is kind of like a shorter list of options, and this is a little bit more advanced. All right, well, let's go ahead and start off with our different fonts. So here you can see, click your drop-down list. Here's an example of all the fonts that are that are preloaded within Photoshop. So let's say we want to go through, there we go, Helvetica New Bold Italic. Okay, let's go ahead and change our color up here to white. And let's hit OK. Now, let's say you have some fonts that you want to add to Photoshop. You're like, okay, well, I'm looking to create this logo, but I don't have everything that I want. Maybe I would like more like script type fonts. Well, you can do that by using Adobe Typekit. Now, Adobe Typekit is included with the Adobe Photoshop CC collection. So if you are on the subscription model, meaning you're paying month to month, you actually have an included subscription to the Typekit. Now, if you guys are using an older version of Photoshop, like CS2, CS3, CS4, unfortunately, you don't have access to that. So that's a really great way, or it's a great time to upgrade so you actually get access to the Typekit. All right, let's show you guys the Typekit here. So in this case, I want to add some scripts to what we've got here. I want to create some scripts. So we're going to go up to Type and down to Add Fonts from Typekit. So let's click there. It's basically going to take us to a web browser here, to Adobe's Photoshop, the TK, the Typekit here. And here I've got basically all the fonts that are listed here on the left are totally available for me to use within Photoshop. So we'll go through and show you guys the process for getting the fonts online that are in the Typekit actually integrated into Photoshop. All right, guys, let's go ahead and start off by searching for our options when we're trying to find types in Photoshop. So here at the top, I recommend where it says choose a sample text. In this case, I know I want to create like a coffee logo, right? So it makes sense for me to go ahead and type in coffee. And that way I'm going to get a default, I'm going to get like a little preview of what the coffee actually looks like. All right, now in this case, I'm going to say, you know what, I'd like this to be script. All right, so it's going to bring up, these are all the scripts that I can load in with Photoshop. We have our availability. I'm going to click on sync, so this is everything that we can actually sync to Photoshop. And then we can even insert our weight. So I want everything that has a standard weight, as well as, you know what, I want to make sure it has a bold weight in there as well. All right, in this case, it's only one, so let's go ahead and unclick that. You can click on a lightweight as well, and even add things like your contrast and your width. If you want to have the most options available, just go ahead and leave all those blank. All right, now this one at the top looks pretty good, so let's go ahead and work on adding this. This is Kinescope, okay? Now, we're going to click here on Use Fonts. There we go. It's going to tell us that it is the font selected, one of one. It's going to allow us to bring in the regular version of this font. Now, some fonts have more than one version. They'll have like a light version, italic, bold version, bold italic. In this case, we just have this one. Let's see, I'm going to hit Escape real quick and see if any of these others include a few different options. All right, clicked on that one. That unfortunately is just one of one as well. And let's try this one. Oh, that one's just one of one as well. All right, so it looks like for the most part, these are just allowing us to bring in one version of these fonts, which is regular. That's okay. Usually it's nice to have a few different variations, but in this case, we'll just go ahead and open up the regular. All right, so let's go ahead and hit Sync Selected Fonts. There we go. It's going to ask us to launch the Creative Cloud app. Now, make sure you're basically logged in online here. I'm on a website, logged in online to the exact same username that you're logged into the Creative Cloud. So we're going to hit Launch the Creative Cloud application. It's going to go ahead and launch this here, and we can see Kinescope right here is synced with our Creative Cloud app. Okay, so this is basically the Creative Cloud app. This is what manages all of Adobe's products when you're signed up for the subscription, like we are here. The newer versions of Photoshop are all signed up for the subscription. So let's go ahead and take a look at that now in Photoshop. Here we see Kinescope. Let's go ahead and jump back into Photoshop. So we'll click here, and then here I'm just going to type in Kine. There we go. And we can see it is available, Kinescope regular. This tells us we're in our Typekit, and here's a little example there. So let's go ahead and click there. Okay, really cool. So now we can see here's our coffee logo loaded into Photoshop. Let's go ahead and make that a little bit smaller so it's not covering up our subject space. All right, so this is a great way to kind of add some fonts into Photoshop if you're like looking to create a little logo or something like this. And again, this works if you have subscription for the Adobe Creative Cloud. All right, let's go ahead and jump into our other options when working with our type. Okay guys, so we've chosen a font here in our Typekit. There we can see. Now we do have a lot of different fonts to choose from here in Photoshop. Now in this font, it doesn't have different font weight variations. Let me just type in another font that I know does. This is included, here we go, on my computer here. So Helvetica New, in this case we have a few different options. I can choose the light variation, the ultra light variation, all the way up to the medium, and I can even choose like bold, italic. So earlier when we were choosing back in Photoshop where we said like, okay, this only has the regular available, That's basically what it's telling us, is it doesn't have different font weights available with that one font. So some fonts will support different weights, just like Helvetica New will. Some fonts don't support that. And sometimes you have to pay to get more font weights. So having different font weights is really nice, but it's not necessary for working in Photoshop. All right, let's go ahead and hit undo here a couple of times. We'll just go back to our kinescope regular. Okay, so that's how that works. Now, Photoshop does have what's called faux bold and faux italic, and those are located right down here. So if you want to make it look like it's bold, you can click here, and you want to make it look like it's italic, you can click here. Now, it's not the same as using the actual font weights in Photoshop, because the font weights are designed by the actual type designers. These are just basically making the letters a little bit wider or slanting them. So if you do have the option, I would highly recommend choosing your font weights here, rather than going with faux bold and faux italic, but you can do that here. All right, guys. Now, moving right along. So we've got our font choice here. Now, here we can choose our font size. Simply click on the T and drag from the left to the right, and that's going to allow you to change your font size here. Okay. Now, if you want to transform your font, you can also hit Control or Command T to transform it, and then hold the Shift key, and then you can also transform your font larger and smaller. And as I hit Enter there, you're going to see it's automatically going to adjust my font size there. I actually recommend using this dialog box rather than just hitting your transform, because sometimes if you just transform your font, it can actually throw off your properties with your different font spacing as well. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at our spacing. Now, with spacing, we have three different options. We have leading. All right, we're going to hover over here. We have our kerning, and we have our tracking. So leading basically adjusts the spacing between each line. So if you have multiple different lines of text, it's going to adjust the spacing between those. Kerning adjusts the spacing between each individual letter, and your tracking adjusts the spacing between letters for the entire word. So you can really spread that out or make that nice and thin. So let's go ahead and show you guys how that works. So let's start off with our leading, which is our spacing between lines. So let's just double click here where it says coffee. We'll go to the end, and I'm going to hit enter and type in "is great." There we go. Now I can't even see that. Let's go ahead and bring that up a little bit there. And here we can see the spacing isn't exactly how I'd want. So let's go ahead and change our spacing. Now I can have it set to auto, or we can choose our spacing here. There we go. And I can simply click here on my, there we go, on this little A symbol, and adjust this up and down as well, which is really helpful if we want to, especially for stuff like this where we want to kind of make it like a graphic type element. All right. Now, most of the time when I'm doing a couple different lines like this in Photoshop, most of the time I'll actually spread out my type in between two different letters. Sorry, in between two different layers, because I got a lot more control between two different layers than I do here within this dialog box. So let's show you guys how that works. I'm going to just double click here where it says coffee is great. We're going to go ahead and select out. All right. Is great. I'm going to go ahead and delete that. Now let's hit Control or Command J on this layer. I'm going to just simply type in "here is great." All right. So now we've got basically two different type layers, and I can simply use my move tool to kind of move these around. I can shrink that quite a bit smaller. There we go. Coffee is great. Put that kind of right under there. And then I'm going to hit Command, click on both of those, hit Command or Control T, and then kind of stretch those up. So again, it's a lot easier to work when you have two different type layers, for instance. There we go. Let's go ahead and bring that up a little bit larger. There we go. I find it's just a lot faster to work with two different layers, especially when you have something like this. Now, if you are trying to do like paragraph text in Photoshop, that's when leading really comes into play. All right. Now, the next thing we're going to take a look at is our kerning, which is the spacing in between each individual letter. So let's go ahead and zoom in for that. Okay, so kerning, here you can simply adjust. First, we need to go ahead and select out a space between each individual letter. So T for the type tool, and we're going to click in between two letters, and now we can start to adjust this. I can pull this in -100, I can pop it out to 200. The easiest way to do this is to click in between two different letters, okay, and then hold Alt or Option, and then use the left and the right arrow on your keyboard, and that's going to allow you to adjust the spacing in between each individual letter just a little bit quicker. All right, so here you can see I can pull these out or in. Let's say by default, the font came and it looked kind of like that. This is a great example for when you would want to use your kerning. So I'm going to hold Alt or Option, and there we go. Click the left arrow a few times, and there we go. Everything looks great. Command Enter to apply that. All right. Now your tracking is set for the entire word. So tracking here, you can have this all the way to -100 and 200, and you can even type in your own numbers. For instance, if I want to type in 400, there we go. You can have it be really, really far spread out like that. All right, let's go ahead and bring that back down to default. All right, so that's our spacing in between each individual letter. Next, we have options out a little bit farther rather than adjusting the width of each letter, which you can see starts to really make my font look horrible. Here we can adjust the spacing, the tracking, and there we go. So the letters, each individual letter still maintains its dignity, and we can go ahead and stretch that out. So in this case, you can kind of combine some of these different, there we go, some of these different ideas here, because sometimes you need a font to kind of just take up a little bit more horizontal space, and that's when I would suggest using tracking. There we go. Coffee, coffee. Ah, that looks so good. Okay, cool. Next we have here our baseline shift. Okay, we can have our font either go higher than our baseline or lower than our baseline. For the most part, I recommend keeping this at 0. If you want a font, or you want your type to move up or down, I suggest just using the Move tool and clicking and moving this up or down when working in Photoshop. Okay, and we have our color, which is pretty self-explanatory there. Okay, next we have our faux bold and faux italic. Again, so let's click on coffee here. Now, our faux bold looks like that. If you are going to apply a bold, I would recommend, if you have the available options, to use your font weight here, to use the actual bold. But if you don't, faux bold is okay. Next we have our faux italics. So in this case, I would click on bold italic if that's what I wanted to look like. Okay, we've got our all caps. Okay, we've got our small caps as well, which is basically going to make the first letter a large cap and the rest of the letters a little bit smaller. All right, we've got our superscript, which pops letters up. Let's go ahead and select out, there we go, we're going to select out the E's. We can pop those as superscripts. You can see it's just put those up above our line there. We can use subscripts, which pops them below our line there. Okay, and there we go. We can choose to underline, and we can choose to strike through as well. All right, now some fonts also gives you different options for how it's actually going to render our different ligatures, and this basically has to do with, for instance, the E. There we go, let's hover over here. Contextual alternative. So if I click here, my E will then extend out. So all these options will not be available with every different font, but some fonts do have basically different versions. So this is the version of the font where the letters don't connect, and this is the version where the letters do connect. All right. So again, most of the time this is going to be working with script fonts, but you do have different options for how they actually display. All right, that looks great. So that's the idea with our character panel. Now here with our paragraph panel, let's go ahead and I'm going to make our large coffee. Let's go ahead and make that invisible. We're going to do a couple of different lines here. So our character panel, let's go ahead and turn on all caps. I'm going to change this spacing back to 0. All right. Coffee, and I'm going to hit Controller Command J. So we're going to do, coffee. In this case, I'm going to type in is great. There we go. And we're going to start off working with there. So let's go ahead and click on our paragraph. Now, by default, our paragraph is going to be left aligned. So let's go ahead and command click both of those lines. Let's left align our paragraphs. Okay. Now, in this case, it makes sense when we start typing something in our let's say we start typing coffee here. I go ahead and erase that and just start typing in coffee from the left. There we go. That's how it's going to type in. Now, if I have this right aligned, there we go, and we have this over there, I'm going to click here, and as I type in coffee, you're going to see it's going to start to form from the right. So individually, it doesn't really make that much of a difference. Like if all I had was this coffee layer, who cares if it starts typing in from the left, the middle, or the right? But when you do have a few of these like actually lined up, so let's say for instance, I've got coffee is great, and let's say I want to make is great. We're going to make this just a little bit smaller here. Okay, and then I'm going to go ahead and line these up. So coffee and then is great. Let's hit Controller Command, click on those two, and then I'm going to use my Move tool and align those to the left there. Okay, now in this case, our paragraph for coffee is right justified, and is great is left justified. Now in this case, I want these to both align left. So let's just say I changed coffee. If I type in soda, all right, now you can see it totally throws off my alignment as well. So if these were both left aligned, let's command click and left align both of those. Okay, now we have to, there we go, align them with each other. So each of these is left justified now. Now if I click here and type in soda, there we go. It's not going to throw off my alignment as well. Okay, so that makes sense when you're actually working with like individual lines right here. It's best to have each individual line justified in the same way. Now you also have options for paragraph justification. Now in this case, if I hit T for my type tool and I click and drag, let's click and drag and we'll create paragraph text. I'm going to go to type and then we're going to go down to paste lorem ipsum, which pumps in just like basically dummy text. All right. Now in this case, let's go ahead and bring our character size a little bit smaller. We're going to bring this down to auto. There we go. That looks good. And you know what? I think I could make this just a little bit wider too. So let's go ahead and click here. There we go. And stretch out our text box. Okay. Now here with our paragraph, we can have this be left justified. You know what? Let's make those invisible so I can just bring this up. Okay. With our paragraph, we can also left justify, center, and right justify. So here you can start to see it makes more sense when you have multiple different lines. And we can also have this space out, there we go, to the left, center, and right as well. This is going to fill my entire text box here. All right. We can also do our margins. We can set margins to the left there. We can set first line margins as well. So just the first lines of new paragraphs jump in. All right, and we can do that from the right side as well. Okay, great. So let's go ahead and bring some of these things together. So we've got our lorem ipsum text down there. Let's hit T for the type tool. I'm going to just select out all that stuff, and we're going to delete it all out because it pasted a lot in there. There we go. Cool. Command Enter there, and all right. Let's go ahead and align that left. There we go. So this might be an example. Let's take our soda. Now I'm going to type in coffee. All right, coffee is great. Command click on three of those, and I can move them around right there as well. All right, so that's a basic idea between the spacing within each individual letter as well as our paragraph spacing with our fonts. All right, guys, now we're going to take a look at adding colors, gradients, and textures to our fonts. So you can do all of those things within your special effects dialog box. So in this case, let's go ahead and click on our coffee here. Now, I'm going to double click on coffee. All right, here where we have our styles, let's go ahead and start off with our default style. There we are. And I can choose all these options just like we've covered in Photoshop 201. So for instance, if I want to add a little bit of a stroke, there we go. We can add a stroke to the outside of our coffee. And all these things are going to render very well because type is technically a vector format, meaning that it's actually calculated. So you can make this larger or smaller and it's not going to lose resolution. All right, so for instance, we want to add stroke. We can do that here. We can add our gradient overlays as well and color overlays here as well. Now, I actually prefer to do this slightly different. So let's go ahead and zoom out here. Now, in this case, let's go ahead and make all these layers invisible. Our background, we have this really cool texture here on our background, right? This like really interesting, basically version of what's going on here in his jacket. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and hit Control Command J to duplicate our background and hit Command E to merge our background together. So now we have our background and it's basically just on one layer. Okay, now let's say we want to bring our layer up here. I'm going to have our coffee visible, and instead of creating the texture and everything like this within our layer effects, I'm actually going to clip this adjustment layer to our coffee layer, okay, by hitting Option Command G. All right, let's go ahead and make a white background layer on the bottom of everything. There we go. Cool. So now we can see we have a lot more options to how we want our different fonts to look when we start using clipping masks. So the texture on the background is now applied on top of the coffee. So I can change the properties here individually of my texture. For instance, if I want to change the width and the height, I can do that. If I want to create a new layer, okay, Option Command G to clip that new layer. And there we go. Let's make a selection around here. And then I'm going to use my gradient tool to maybe add like a light pink to that. I can do that as well. Let's change our blend mode to something like soft light. All right, overlay might be a little more visible. There we go. Okay, so I can do all these things to my coffee layer, okay, as clipping masks. So this is, in general, when I'm adding like textures and gradients and like different colors and things like that to my fonts, generally I'll do this as clipping masks rather than within the layer effects panel because we do have just a lot more options as far as what I can do, and I have a lot more control as well. All right, cool. Let's go ahead and undo that, and we'll get back to where we were just a minute ago. All right, and we'll delete that. There we go. Coffee is great, and our lorem ipsum. Okay, now let's work on some of the spacing between our different letters here. So let's take our lorem ipsum down, and oftentimes what I'm trying to do here in Photoshop is, you know, something like this. Let's say we have our coffee, and then I want to take is great. That's going to be our slogan or whatever. And I want to make this a little bit more graphic. So in this case, I want to try to make everything kind of fit within one line. So we're going to hit Control Command T for coffee. I'm going to hold the Shift key down and try to bring this. There we go. We're going to bring this a little bit smaller. But in this case, you know what? The is great. The two lines of text are a little bit too similar in size there. So let's go back to Window and Character. So I'm going to go down to is great. There we go. Let's go ahead and make this a little bit smaller. We're going to change our weight here to, let's go to medium. Let's just go to italic. There we go. And now I'm going to change the tracking here. All right. Let's go ahead and bring our tracking up. Sorry, we don't want to change the character width there. Let's bring our tracking up. All right, to kind of like block that out there. All right, shift click the two of those and hit Command T, and now I can stretch that out there. So this is how we can use different font weights. Let's go ahead and bring this down just a little bit. Different font weights as well as our tracking to kind of get, you know, like one big bold word there and then a couple of lines here. We just basically adjusted the tracking in between each individual letter to create this effect, and rather than like stretching the words out, we're able to fill this entire area. All right, guys, we're almost done here. The last thing we're going to do is convert our type to a pen path, and we're going to show you how to actually edit a pen path to add a little bit more flair to this text. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at our type here. Now, we're going to use a font. We're going to choose the Grapholita script medium. You guys can choose any script you want. Now, in this case, this font is actually available from our type kit. So let's go to our type, go to Add Fonts from Type Kit. All right, it's going to load for a second. All right, let's go ahead and click on our scripts. And here we can see our Grapholita script. So to add this, simply click on Use Fonts. There we go. And in this case, I've already added it. So I've got it says Remove All Fonts. You can see it is synced there. Just follow the steps we did earlier. Okay, so we're going to go back to our Grapholita script. There we go. And if I need to adjust the kerning between each individual character, I can do so. T for the type tool, and I can click and hold Alt or Option. Simply click left or the right. Okay, in this case, it looks pretty good. So we're going to hit Command or Control Enter. All right, now in this case, I want to zoom in a bit, and we're actually going to be converting this type to a pen path. To do so, simply right-click on your type and go down to Create a Work Path. Now, your work path is stored right over here with your paths, so we're just going to double-click here. We're going to call this Coffee. Okay, and now with my work path, basically I can take this and edit it however I'd like. So in this case, I want this C to kind of come up and kind of swoop out around there. Okay, so we're going to use our pen tool. Let's hit P for our pen tool and start working with our type here. So again, hold Control or Command. There we go, to start working with your actual type. And then I can simply click on any of these points and start moving it around. Now in this case, I actually want to add a couple of points, okay? Because I want this to kind of like swerve out there. So let's go ahead and let's click and drag this guy out. Hold Control or Command. We're going to click on and drag that one out there as well. Okay, now we do need to add a couple points. To do so, simply hover right over your pen path and click, and you're going to add a point. There we go. Let's do the same thing here. Hover over and click, and I can add a point there. All right, so here we can see now our type looks like this. All right, let's go ahead and add a point here and one here as well. Sorry, make sure you're selected on your typeface. All right, I'm going to hold Control or Command and bring that up. There we are. And let's go ahead and smooth this one out. So Control or Command, and we're going to bring this down. All right, and this one too. Now you can see this looks okay, but we really don't have any kind of like continuity going right? Like this, you know, if you simply like look at this pen path, you can see like, it doesn't really look that great. All we've done is move some points around. So now we need to actually change the curves to make everything look nice and fluid. So to do so, again, we're not clicked on our actual path right now. So click on your pen tool, hit Control or Command, and then click on your path. This is going to bring it so you can actually start editing it again. Okay, now we're going to hold down, let's find our right level of zoom here. We want to be able to see the whole thing. I'm going to hold down Alt or Option, which is basically does the exact same as the Convert Anchor Point tool. Okay, so hold Alt or Option and click here, and now I'm able to drag from left to the right. So in this case, we're going to go, there we go, I'm going to go up and then down low with this. All right, there we go. And we'll go small, and then you know what, we're going to have this kind of finish a little bit larger there. All right, so definitely looking a little bit better. It's kind of coming up and down low, but this part, you can see this definitely looks not good. So let's go ahead and zoom in here, Command plus a couple times. Okay, still on our pen tool, we're going to hit Control or Command, click on our points here, and then I'm going to start clicking on these points. Again, I want to convert these points because you can see the angles aren't really what I want yet, right? So Alt or Option, click there, and then we can simply drag out to get the angles that we want here. There we go. Alt or Option on that one as well. All right, now let's hold Control or Command and click out and see how we're looking now. A little bit better, but still not there just yet, right? So let's go ahead and bring this point up just a little bit. And we're going to bring that point up as well. All right. And see how this looks. All right, so definitely, you know, have a lot of appreciation for the person who did the Coca-Cola font, right? Now you're like, oh yeah, this is kind of, it's really cool that you can do this, but it's definitely a little bit tricky to get like a consistent font weight and curvature, you know, throughout, like if we're going to go from here all the way back down. It can be pretty tricky. All right, there we go. So kind of bringing that down. All right, and that starts to look pretty good there. Again, not perfect. Probably spend a little bit more time. Let's just get this to kind of, I'm going to hold Alt or Option and click there to minus that point out, actually. There we go, giving me a smoother line there. All right. So we can see it kind of comes nice and thick there. There we go. Let's bring this up just a little bit. Control or Command click there. It goes nice and thin, and then kind of finishes out a bit on the thick side. And we can hold Control or Command and click here and simply drag that out as well. All right, and kind of come up really thick there. If we wanted to, drag that down and continue on with the E, we could do that. But in this case, I think we're just going to bring it up like that. All right. Pretty cool. So basically, we took this font and extended out the C to have it look like this. Again, this is not perfect, but you get the idea. Okay, so now that we have our actual pen path here, we're going to go ahead and click on our font. We're going to make that invisible. Okay, we're going to make our pen path visible here. Okay, and then we can simply turn this into a shape. We can turn this into a shape. So we can click on our actual path here. Okay, we can go over to shape, which converts our path into a shape layer. So let's go back here. This is our shape layer now. Okay, and then we can adjust the properties of our shape layer. Let's go ahead and double click on our shape layer properties. And here we can adjust our fill color as well as our stroke color. So let's bring our stroke maybe a little bit larger. I think that looks cool. All right. And we can change our stroke color as well. In this case, I actually kind of like that. I think that looks pretty good. So let's go back to our move tool. You know what? We need to let's go back to our shape options here. We'll bring our fill color to white. There we go. And in this case, we're going to say don't have a stroke. Cool. So there we can see how to bring basically what just started out as a totally normal font. We just took this area and extended on around and brought that there. All right, let's put a little coffee is great. I'm going to click here, we'll go to Window and down to, Character. Clicked on Channels by accident. Okay, there we go. And let's just type in this case, we're going to use Helvetica. And we're going to go down to New. Let's change our font weight over to Bold. Okay, I'm going to click on All Caps, and we'll make that nice and smaller. There we go. And there's our makeshift logo from our coffee. So obviously we did this relatively quickly here, but we do have a nice shape layer that we can change at any point in time. Simply click on your shape, and you can change the fill as well as the stroke as well. So this is a really nice way to make a logo relatively quickly. And now we can group those together, move them around as if they're one. All right, guys, let's go ahead and hit F for full screen, and we can take a look. That's our final image. All right, guys, thanks so much for watching this section on type. I hope you enjoyed learning how to add fonts to your type library, how to adjust the spacing, the tracking, the leading, and the kerning for each individual letter, as well as how to convert a font to an actual path and then change that into a logo in Photoshop. Thanks so much, guys. We'll see you in the next section. Bye, everyone.